what you have now, if I just put these together, is you have your tails coming out like this at an angle, and you can just about see your last sewing stitch there. What you're going to do is you're going to make sure that your bodice is vertical, and you're going to put this into your sewing machine and sew a line of stitching up until it reaches this line of stitching. So you're going to go straight up. Then once you've done that, you'll make sure that your pieces are together. Because you went up that way with this line of stitching, you're now going to go in the opposite way along the top.
It might help if you draw a pencil line to help you, like we've done here.
Okay, we've now sewn that angle, and this is what is going to happen. You turn your bodice the right way over, and then as you can see, you have now sewn your V-line. So when that turns underneath like so, that will be your edging, and you've got a nice straight V. Now we're going to sew the long piece along from the front over the shoulder to the back, and pin that on to your bodice. And down here, if you move the first one out of the way, you can just about see the last stitch. Lay that over the top and mark where your stitch will start, right next to that one. Then you're going to sew it on, and you'll see where the angle cuts there. We want to stop about here where I've got my finger, so turn the whole thing the right way out. I'm going to put a stop stitch point just there where the V is, and you do the same for the other side. Okay, now I've just sewn on my second part to the shoulder section, and leaving that excess, carefully separate the two pieces, and you can just see your fabric underneath. Excuse my fingers. And now we're going to do exactly as we did at the front section. We're going to cut as close as we can to the stitching. That's where the first section and the second section start. So we've now got a little snip. Now we're going to do exactly the same manoeuvre. We're going to turn the whole lot to the inside, like so. And now we're going to have two little tails that come out like that. Make sure they're together like that. And whereas before we had the bodice was at a vertical, we're now going to do another sewing stitch. I just move this out of the way. And we're going to go from where the stitching last stitch is there. We're going to do an angle up. If I just draw it here to be easier, I'm going to do an angle up to the stitching, and then we're going to do an angle down on the other side, and that's where our sewing line will be. Okay, just showing you here how it should look when that section is put on. And now we're going to go to the other end at the back, and we're going to put the final strip along the bottom using exactly the same method. You just gently move this out the way, and where that last stitch happens, that's where your first stitch will be to sew your fabric on along that line. This is just showing now all the finished needlework. It's pinned in place, and what you will do is go to the inside and you'll turn the seam and cut out any excess fabric that you need to, and hand sew the inside so it looks neat. Right, to make the armhole trim, I'm going to do exactly the same as I did for the inside bodice. Okay, as I was saying, I'm going to do exactly the same as I did for the inside trim. I've got some tissue paper laid down, and I'm going to be drawing the curve of my armhole. And as you can see here, I've got my side front piece. I'm going to allow for an overlap for the seams. Then over here I've got my back piece, and I'm going to overlap that. So this will be my finished shape. Right, now then, when you've cut out your pieces, you'll have two pieces of fabric and one piece of liner, and remember that you'll need a left and a right-handed curve, so do one way and then the other one the other way, and then we're going to be sewing on the inside edge about 1 centimetre in. When those have been sewn, don't forget to cut off any excess liner and clip your corners. Right, before I go on to doing the armhole, I want to reduce some of the bulk here at the seams. So what I've done is I've cut down the excess coutil between all the layers. So I'm just now left with the liner and the velvet, and I've done that for all the seams, front and back, basically so that I can cut down on the amount of bulk here when I put the armhole in. And also, wherever you have a curve on your seams, you're going to be clipping those curves down to the sewing line. And when you come to do your armhole, which by the way is a lot easier than doing the inside bit, it will all be done in one piece, of course. You do it exactly the same technique. Sew it on first, and then on the inside you're going to be hand stitching it to the inside of the bodice. While you're hand sewing your trim to the inside and you get to the ends, leave the last couple of inches open, because when we come to sew up the side seam, I want to continue the side seam all the way up, so it'll neaten off the trim as well. Right, this is the side seam, and it's been done up with black thread, but for the last bit I changed that to gold so that it would blend in right. Now what I'm going to do is get the coutil layer and reduce that down to the seam line to cut out some of the bulk. Okay, and the last thing that you will do is turn over the trim and fold it under, and then finish hand sewing that to the inside of the bodice. Right, we're now going to measure for the bottom trim, and what we found is from the centre point to the back opening, it's more or less a straight line. So we took a measurement of that and added about 20 centimetres, which is about 8 inches, and then go into our gold fabric. This is 6 centimetres wide, and cut it to the measurement and then fold that in half and press it. Now we're going to thread all the boning into the channels that we made. Push it up to the top as far as it will go and do all the boning.
Okay, now we've threaded our boning through. As you can see, we left the ends open earlier. This is obviously so you can get your boning in. Stupid statement of mine. Right, what we're going to do now is moving the velvet layer aside a second, as we can still lift it up and separate the layers at this point, is by hand we're going to seal the liner and a courtile together at the bottom. As it's going to be a bit awkward now putting it under the machine, it will have to be done by hand. If the channels had come a bit lower, we might have been able to get away with not doing this and just putting the basic trim on and creating a seam. But as we don't want the boning slipping out of place and starting to poke through over time, we're just doing this by hand now.
Okay, once you've cut your strip of material, pin a piece of interliner or stiffener on one side and then start to pin that along the edge of your bodice at the bottom, and finally hand sew it to the inside of the bodice.
I've been really excited about waiting to show you guys this, but here is my little piece of gold. It is in fact an invisible, concealed, open-ended zip. Now in the past, to making some previous bodices, I have complained to zip companies about why on earth you cannot get hold of open-ended concealed zips. It just did not make sense in this day and age, why every other zip you can get is either open or closed end except the invisible ones, which a lot of us out there would greatly need for these bodices if you don't wish to do traditional methods of doing up your bodices, which possibly is hooks and eyes, etc. Anyway, I got onto this company called YKK Zips amongst many. This was the only company who came back to me and said, yes, we do them, but for some silly reason, I don't know why, they say they don't advertise them, which is a bit bonkers really, because I mean, how do you sell if you don't advertise? But anyway, they gave me the zip as a gesture of goodwill, because I was quite upset. So I suggest if any of you folks want this to get more readily available out there, I suggest just complaining like crazy to zip companies, because they obviously can be made and there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. It works fine. I'll just demonstrate now. Here we go, this is the zip done up. And then undone. I've only ever put closed end concealed zips in before, so we're not saying that the way we're going to do it is probably right for this type of zip, because we've never done one open-ended, so we're just going to do our best. This is the bodice edges now finished and catch stitched underneath. I cannot stress how incredibly difficult that was to do. And certainly nothing I want to do again in a great hurry. Wasn't the most difficult thing we've ever done, but there we go. Okay, like I tried to explain earlier, we're not quite 100% on if we're doing this right, but we think this is the way to go about it, following the same principles of putting in a normal concealed zip with a closed end. So you take the one side and you can see we've just pinned it in place, roughly about this distance from the edge, and then then a similar thing with the other side, making sure the teeth on this side are pointing inwards. Make sure your zip starts again roughly the same distance from your edge as you have on the other side, like so.
The last bit you need to do on the zip is to fold it to the underside so you can just about see the zip, and then where you had this piece of fabric at the bottom, turn that under to neaten it off, and then at the top turn the zip into the inside like so, and then just hand sew that closed at the top, and then hand sew your zip and your seam allowance. Hand sew that down so it's secure, and then just neaten up at the bottom, and do that for the other side as well. And that is your zip finished.
Okay, this is now the finished bodice. Now I've only put it on Betty for now. Betty, our model. It doesn't quite fit her the same way as it fits me, but you'll see me wearing it later on in a video. As soon as I've got my wig and my boots and everything, just taking time, but you can sort of see the overall look there. The hardest part was doing these trims around the outside compared to actually putting the bodice together. This was the hardest part of all. Just taking around the armholes. Now, as I said, it doesn't quite fit her the same, so it doesn't quite go around the whole model, but it does on me, so anyway. This is our open-ended invisible zip. I'm going to put it on the table in a moment and zip it up and show you it properly until I can demonstrate it later on myself for you. Okay, I'm just quickly showing you the back of the bodice here with the concealed zip. I personally think this looks a lot neater and a lot better than putting a normal zip in, because it actually just looks like you've got one tidy seam line down the back. There we go, that concludes the bodice.